we're going to go into what is a strategy I could do to help treat for that or help cure it up or help get it out of my lawn starting right now. And I want to reiterate, this is a strategy that I think the vast majority of you should follow. It is probably not the number one best strategy. It is definitely not the number one quickest strategy, and it's probably not the easiest strategy or the most expensive strategy. It's none of that, but I think it is one of those things that will work for the majority of you. So the first thing you do, and this is like right now, no matter what part of the country you're in, if you're seeing those brown spots that you've identified as Poa Annua or Poa Trivialis, or if there's crabgrass in there too, you might as well get that dug up at the same time. But what I recommend you do is go out and dig up those areas. Just go out and take them out. Now, if you want to use glyphosate to make sure you kill everything off first, you can, but I don't necessarily think that that is necessary. I think it's just better to not glyphosate because digging the plant out should effectively kill it to the point that's good enough that I'm going to say we're good. If you want to go the extra step and glyphosate the area, go right ahead. Just follow the label on. Don't have to glyphosate it out. The idea is to perform surgery. Go into the areas and dig it out. Now be logical, right? If you have it in a patch that is in one corner of your driveway, don't just dig it out in circles and weird things, because I'm going to have you resod here in a minute. Dig it out in a nice, easy square. Make it logical. Also realize it's not going to blend right away, especially if you have an old school lawn. If you bring in sod, it's going to take a while for that to blend. You know, throwing a bunch of fert on it will help. So let's be logical. If we have areas where there are shadow lines, or there are tree lines, or fence lines, or sidewalks or driveways where you can logically, put the sod, cut the sod in where it may not show the best or the worst or the most, where it won't stick out as much, that's what I would do. Be logical. Now, a pallet of sod will cover about 400 square feet. If you can do a perfect square, it will cover 400 square feet. So what I would do is, and I don't know how big your POA problem is, measure out 400 square feet around it and go for something around that size. Keep it in easy squares, following sight lines, following bed lines, following whatever is logical. And then, of course, as I've been alluding to, right after you do that, right after you cut all that out, now listen, don't dig the soil up too much. Don't dig down deep. Don't do that. Don't till it. Just like sod cutter, really, if you want to rent a sod cutter, but these are small areas, you can do them by hand. Just cut it off. Just cut everything off, about an inch down. That's all you got to do. Sod cut it out of there. Immediately after that, drop your sod. The reason I want you to drop the sod, I mentioned this earlier in the podcast, is because that's going to immediately blot out the sun. It's going to have an immediate effect on keeping water from getting too deep. It's going to have an immediate effect on keeping the sun from destroying microbes too harsh. The other thing, though, it has a blanket. Think of a blanket covering that any seed of Poa Annua or whatever is under there, or stolons that might have dropped off of the Poa Trivialis, it will help to outcompete that. And in the case of Rob here, it seems like his sod was able to outcompete or keep out the Poa problem for a good 3 years before he started noticing it. So what I'm getting at is, let the sod do its thing. We always say that a dense, healthy turf stand is the very best weed control. Well, when you put sod down, you're getting a dense, almost healthy turf stand almost right away. So think of it in those terms. Some seeds are going to be left under the ground. Yes, they are. I don't care what you do. No matter what strategy you go for here, there's going to be the possibility of seeds and stolons left under the ground. So that's why I like sod. Drop it in and go. Now, some people will say, Alan, I don't want to live with that dark, blue sod versus my light green lawn. I don't want to wait for it to blend in. Well, the other option is to sit there with the brown dead Poa, you see? So I think that having a sodded spot that doesn't look quite as match the same green as the rest of the lawn right away is better than brown stuff. And of course, if people ask you what you're doing, you tell them, man, a Poa problem, I had to dig it out of there, do a little surgery in a grassy last week. You saw me out there sweating in a 95-degree heat. You guys are in there playing Xbox, watching NASCAR on the afternoons on Sunday. I'm out there working in my grace. I'm out there putting in work, brah. That's why I dominate this hood, right? So you can get a little construction talk out of it if you want. But the idea being, dig it out, sod it. Then you're going to water. We've already talked here about how to establish sod. That's why I included that piece in the earlier part of the podcast here on getting the water in, using your RGS, your root growth stimulant, getting everything to grow. By the way, when you're doing that RGS, you're doing those micros to establish that sod, just do the whole lawn. By the way, that can help it to blend in a lot quicker. But the idea being, sod those areas. Now, what's that going to cost me, Alan? Well, a pallet of sod, and it varies. And some of you all that know this, please leave in comments. Let me know if I'm off. But in this area, I can get a pallet of sod for about $300. So I'm assuming it's going to be something similar where you are. A pallet of sod is about $300. So if you had a 400 square foot area, the cost is going to be about $300. But remember, you've got instant lawn. The POA is instantly gone, and you have an instant lawn there, and within 30 days, you'll be mowing it. And it blots out the sun, and it keeps everything buried in the deep where it should stay. Now, I'm not done. Remember, you're doing this now in the middle of the summer. Once your sod is established, and that's 2 mowings is typically when I'm going to say your sod is established. And I read the label of dithiopyr because that's the product I'm going to talk about right now. What you're going to do is after 35 days, which is when you should have mowed the lawn twice, after 35 days, go ahead and apply dithiopyr, which is a pre-emergent that is labeled to stop Poa Annua. It is not labeled to stop Poa Trivialis, but that is because no one applies pre-emergents as a control for Poa Trivialis, so they don't list it on the label. There isn't anyone out there that is applying pre-emergence specifically to stop Poa Trivialis or Poa Trivialis at all that I know of, because it's a perennial, right? It spreads by stolons. So no one is out there doing it. But I will tell you, if there are Poa Trivialis seeds in your lawn from an old seed mix that was thrown down that are left over, right? It will stop those from germinating. Just like I tell you that dithiopyr will stop turf-type tall fescue or Kentucky bluegrass or perennial ryegrass seeds from germinating. Those are not on the label of dithiopyr because people are not putting dithiopyr down to stop Kentucky bluegrass from germinating or perennial rye or turf-type tall fescue, so they don't list it on the label. But I will tell you, and everybody will tell you, and everybody will verify, if you're seeding Kentucky bluegrass, you don't put down dithiopyr because it will stop your Kentucky bluegrass from germinating. Again, taking off down a rabbit trail here, but I want to just clear things up for you. You're putting this dithiopyr down at the 35-day mark after 2 mowings when we know the sod is established because it will stop any Poa Annua seeds that are underneath that sod that's been blotting it out and holding it down, as well as any Poa Trivialis seeds that might just happen to be there because they're naturally there because they've been living there since the dawn of time or because they were seeded in an old seed mix in the 80s or whatever. The idea being the 2 things I've done is I've blotted the sun out with sod, I've established an immediate root system within 30 days, and I've started to mow so I can mow things out, as well as I'm putting down now dithiopyr in the fall, and that dithiopyr is going to stop any seeds from germinating into that grow. By the way, it'll also stop other things like henbit and I don't know what else is out there, hairy bittercress. Jeez, stop a lot of other things too. So dithiopyr is good for a lot of stuff, but I think that's a good way to do it. Now, 30 days after that, you're going to apply dithiopyr again, and I'll give you many, many more strategies. Those of you that have my ebook, I will be doing fall plans for you. This will be a part of that, but it'll be all written out in extreme detail. By the way, if you don't have one of my e-guides, one of my e-plans, go to thelawncarenut.com and pick it up. I promise you all of these strategies I'm talking about here are going to be written out, spelled out with recommended products that you can get right away in that guide. That guide is coming out in the first couple days of August. So I wanted to just kind of get that out there to you. That guide is also going to go up in price to $34.95 as of August 1st, but if you're hearing this before then, you can get it for the price of $25 now. I've got also full support on the back end that was never there before, so that's another thing that will add to it. So go to thelawncarenut.com and get that, and more strategies are going to come out. Now, I'm going to bring those strategies out in the podcast, in videos, in emails, and everywhere else, but those are all in support of that guide. So it's like I always tell you guys, listen, you can get everything from me that's in the guide. You can get it. It's just you'll have to dig through videos, emails, podcasts, all these things, 10 years worth of content from before. You'll have to dig through all that to really put it all together. What my guides do is put it together, spell it out for you, show you what to get, how to get it, why to get it, here's where you can, here's where you shouldn't, all of those things. The book ties it all together, the guide, and for right now, it's still only $25. But that is the quick way that I would recommend if you're starting now. Now, I have different strategies if you're going to start later, if you're going to go after your Poa problem later, because not everybody's going to go after it here in the middle of the summer just because you're not able to. But if you're going to go after it here in the middle of the summer, I will go ahead and reiterate, it's to cut it out, drop sod, establish the sod after 2 mowings, dithiopyr or prodiamine. Prodiamine works fine too. The thing about prodiamine is a majority of you that listen to this podcast used prodiamine in the spring, and you don't have any left for the fall, or if you do, it's not that much because prodiamine has a yearly maximum on it. Dithiopyr, which works very similar, especially in the fall, and Poa Annua was going to work great, does not have the same label restrictions. You can throw it down a lot harder, but that's the idea, is get those pre-emergence down in the fall. And then the final piece is the next year. The next year, you're probably going to get some of it to come back, but here's the deal. At that point, the hope is that we've reduced a large percentage of it with these strategies, 80%, 90%. And then you can just control it by digging it out. And this is where I want to shout out my buddy Pete from GCI Turf. Pete actually got some problem grasses in his lawn. If you go back and look at his video from May 4th of this year, it's called Grassy Weeds in My Yard. He actually points out a couple areas where he has some problem grasses that came in. And what those problem grasses are, he doesn't necessarily know, but he just cuts them out. He just does surgery. I think it's a 10-minute video. He cuts out like these giant patches, and it's that easy. So I never want you to be scared to eliminate a lot of the problem with these strategies here. And then as the following year comes up, you just do a little bit of surgery and you just dig them out a little bit here and there.